Welcome everybody here to Current Affairs Taiwan. We have a great show coming up ahead of us. And Donovan, what do we have on store for us today?
All right. We definitely got a good show. We've got the Jessica DRUN is now my new hero, fighting back and battling against the International Civil Aviation Org and China's and the PRC's interference with that. We've got the KMT Reform Committee. They've laid out 4 things that they want to fix. It's a good list, but it's a tough climb. Now, we also talk about how there's a lot of bigwigs and a lot of people in the KMT are talking about how the 92 consensus needs to be re-examined. So that's interesting. Johnny Chiang has entered the KMT race. Check this show out. There's a lot coming up. All right, welcome to Current Affairs Taiwan. I'm Donovan Smith, and this is Scott Ellinger. Mike, say hi.
Oh, hello. I'm supposed to be Mike today, but I think there's something happened. There's a technical glitch, so I'm in the picture today.
All right. So, actually, Michael Turton is on vacation.
Oh, lucky dog.
In the Philippines. Much deserved one. But first, I'd like to kick off reminding everybody that we have a sponsor now, Tainan May Jam. This year is the 20th anniversary. So definitely this is going to be worth checking out. It's all original music. This festival has been going for years. It's free. It's May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
Oh, I like free.
And be sure to check out mayjam.com or check on Facebook, Tainan May Jam on Facebook. So, all right. Now, speaking of Mike, he'll be back next week. And check out on report.tw. He's not gone this week completely because he wrote an article for us. So,
that's report.tw. And I saw the parts of the article, so I got to read the first 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
That's
definitely
good stuff,
check it out on the train back.
Oh, yes,
it's a good article. Mike's always got great stuff. So, just quickly, introduce yourself.
I'm Scott Ellinger, live in Taipei. Came down here to Taichung to help out the crew here for CAT this week with Mike being on vacation in the Philippines. That's a lucky dog. But here it's, 15 degrees Celsius and we're cold, and he's probably there in at least 30-degree weather, sunshine, beach. But so I was been in the U.S. military for 22 years, retired about 6 years ago. After retirement, I was before retirement, I was stationed at AIT for 4 years in the military section. Then I retired in 2013, and I've been living in Taiwan ever since. So, I have a good background on understanding the geopolitical issues of U.S. policy vis-a-vis Taiwan and vis-a-vis China. So I understand this triangular dynamic, as well as our U.S. policy with Southeast Asia and just overall the entire greater Asian context of how we look at the relationships as a greater whole.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'd like to mention that one of the big reasons that Scott came down here is we have another show, which we've done one before, not with me or Mike. It was actually Daniel who did this one. It's Taiwan Context. And we did a whole interview here with Scott. Great show. Be sure to check it out. It goes into much more detail on the issues that you know a lot about.
It's mainly the geopolitical issues of the United States, and it goes back into like the 1949, 1950, and then we bring that picture to today, and it really kind of matches up this parallel issue of what was faced back then. We're facing the exact same geopolitical issues of today. So please take a look at it, and of course, everything is on report.tw.
So what we're unfortunately, a lot of the news this week isn't really in your bailiwick, unfortunately. But we did get Taiwan Context recorded, so that's good news.
Yes.
So all right, I want to kick off with ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. Now, I have a new hero. Her name is Jessica DRUN. Don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but she questioned on Twitter the ICAO, which is International Safety Organization,
yes,
so that it connects up airports and civil aviation authorities around the world, so they coordinate and share information. Now, of course, Taoyuan here in Taiwan is one of the biggest hubs in all of East Asia, so it's an important destination. Now, she raised the question to ICAO and to the World Health Organization, WHO, and she asked them, why she essentially asked, why are you refusing to share information with authorities in Taiwan? Now, of course, we know that's because China has made sure that that can't happen. But she questioned this on Facebook. Now, the ICAO then blocked her. Now, me and a bunch of other people shared this around on Twitter.
Oh, interesting.
And I put in some sarcastic comments about the ICAO, and I got banned from their Twitter page. So now this was then picked up by for Axios. An article was written by Bethany Allen Ebrahimian. And she was the one who came out with a lot of stuff on Xinjiang, the Xinjiang papers last year.
She had really good articles about that.
She does some great work, really impressive work. But so Jessica, what ended up happening is that this went then to the Axios article. It was then tweeted around with a lot of voices of support by U.S. senators and representatives, the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And so Jessica really got a lot of international attention to this issue.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so she's my hero for doing that.
Yeah, and I read the article earlier this morning,
Yeah.
and it was interesting that it's the connection that you see now in the ICAO and controls their public information is that person I think is Chinese. Am I correct or not?
That's correct. You're
From China.
absolutely correct.
I think it's Guangqi Ning is the name, right?
I can't remember.
I think
the
it's
name
Guangqi Ning or Guangqi
Yeah.
Ming is the name, and you can see it in the article. And that's I would put in a $100 wager here that person is the one that blocked these Twitter accounts and your account too. I would probably put probably a $200 wager, U.S. dollars, not Taiwan dollars.
I think I think the person who's in charge of the social media or marketing or something is also from the People's Republic.
Well, I think that's the name.
Yeah.
It's Guangqi Ning
Oh,
or
right.
Chiang
Okay,
Ming. That's the person that did that.
Because the head of the ICAO is from the PRC.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's probably why they're a little bit more dramatic in their response than the World Health Organization.
Oh, did somebody get their feelings hurt?
Oh
no!
The feelings of the Chinese people.
My feelings are hurt
again.
I got my feelings hurt.
I know. I feel so sorry.
So it's two people that they've hurt our feelings. That's 2 versus 1.3 billion. Oh well, we're lost. We lost this one. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
So anyway, check that article out on Axios and check out. Anyway, it's worth looking into. And this is important because, and she brought this up in the context of right now with the Wuhan coronavirus. This information is not being shared with health authorities here in Taiwan, with aviation authorities in Taiwan, and of course, the main point of entry for the virus coming in would, of course, be the airports.
Oh, of course, yes.
So it's absolutely critical that this sort of information is being shared. And a lot of it is not. Now, I did see a report that that authorities in China have been sharing some information on the outbreak with the government here. How much, how transparent, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But
well, I think we talked a little bit earlier before we started the show, in between the break with Taiwan context, is we discussed a little bit about the narrative, right? So who's controlling the narrative? And so we can see within the WHO, the ICAO, who controls the narrative, and that's China controls it. I mean, they're the dominant force in controlling this narrative. And so it goes back into where we discussed, where's the United States in putting our narrative out there and supporting Taiwan to be some type of member to the ICAO or WHO, so that way their voices are there, and that way the information can come here in a transparent way that they get all the information. And I think this goes back into what we discussed in the other show, is the United States really needs to be heavily involved and counter this dominant narrative that the PRC continues to, let's say, ram down the throats of everybody, and it really keeps in this. Right now we're in a pandemic, not an epidemic. This is a pandemic. And so that's Da Liu Xing in Chinese, not Liu Xing. This is Da Liu Xing. So it is a pandemic, because we just saw that video of that nurse, And she's been claiming with her, I'm not sure how she did her video, but she got it out, 90,000.
That's what she was claiming, and she did the video.
So I mean, of course,
yeah.
we don't know what it is, but this is one thing where if the transparency is really there, we would have better access for Taiwan to make sure their defensive measures are up and ensuring that the spread is contained. It's contained and it doesn't come onto the island. So this goes back into controlling the narrative, and the United States, we need to be a little bit more forceful in ensuring that Taiwan has participation in some of these key international organizations.
So be sure to check out the show on Taiwan Context. It'll be on report.tw. Our interview, because you had quite a few interesting things to say on that.
That's correct. So that's report.tw. I'm trying to mimic how Mike does it. So that's my glory for today.
All right. So moving on, we've got the KMT Reform Committee has been set up. Now, what they're going to be doing is coming out with a report that they hope to have ready by late March. Now, if it's done by late March, that is because in early March, I believe it's March 7th, is when the election for the new KMT chair will be held and the new Central Standing Committee.
Oh, okay.
So now it's technically a by-election that will go until May of 2021. So now here's what they're going to be targeting. They want to reform their personnel systems. They want to address cross-strait relations. They want to target youth participation and finances. Now, of these things, those are actually for what the KMT has to deal with. Those are actually it's a good list of priorities to be working on. As far as their personnel and finances, these two are connected. Financially, there was a great piece that was originally by Voice Tank, but on Ketagalam Media that talked about the finances. And the KMT's finances, they spend something like, was it 1.7 billion? And 1.59 billion of that is in pension costs. And traditionally, what the KMT, when they were billed as the world's richest political party, because they had all the assets that they'd taken over from the Japanese, and when it was a one-party state, of course, the government gave the KMT a lot of assets. These assets were seized by the ill-gained assets law, so that all those assets were frozen. But the problem that left the KMT with is that before, they would often give these plum positions to people for their loyalty and service to the party. They give them these plum positions where they basically smoked cigarettes and drank tea, in the memorable phrase of Nathan Batto on Facebook. And these guys are still, a lot of these people are still there. But they finally did get rid of a lot of them, but they still have to pay their pensions. They're still legally on the hook for this.
Oh, okay.
Now, they only get 400 and some odd million in income right now. So there's a shortfall of 1.2, 1.3 billion NT annually. So their finances they're pretty well screwed. And of course, they've pissed off Terry Go, who was their biggest benefactor before, who bailed them out when the assets law was passed last time. And he was a regular contributor to campaigns. So where are they going to come up with the money? I don't know. Now, the other problem is apparently I've heard that they got rid of a lot of their good people when they were trying to save money and kept a lot of those cigarette smokers and tea drinkers. So they have to if they want to, the only way that they can get those assets back or unfrozen, if they're not already spent by then, is to win the next election, seize control of the presidency and the legislature, and then change the law, which is, I think, what they were hoping they were going to do this time. Obviously, that didn't happen. So but they're going to need those professionals to get elected next time. But if they bring in new professionals, that increases their wage costs and increases their asset liabilities, their pension liabilities.
So right now you're stuck in a catch-22. What are they going to do?
It's your best guess.
Yeah.
So then we move on to youth participation. Now, Wu Duanyi, he basically screwed over the KMT on this front. There have been some weak, feeble attempts to bring in younger members under his predecessors. But what he did is he put in a party list that basically came out of a nursing home, and most of the candidates who ran in the geographical districts are all largely older men.
Very old, yeah.
Very old. The average age, I forget the exact numbers, but the average age was 60 some odd, I think it was, versus I think it was the low 40s or upper 30s for the DPP. For the candidates.
It's a 20-year gap.
Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty wide.
So if they want to do anything that will appeal to younger voters, their own caucus probably wouldn't support most of this stuff. A lot of their membership wouldn't support it because it skews demographically older.
Yeah.
So they're going to have a lot of problems. And the issues that younger voters care about, things like marriage equality, these sorts of issues, their own current demographic base generally doesn't support. And the parties move to a social conservatism, particularly in the center and the South, in the last 2 election cycles. So you put those together, I don't really see where they're going to be coming up with. They tried campaigning on pollution. It might have helped them in the local elections. That might appeal to some younger voters, maybe. There's some other issues. They tried throwing out in the hand campaign a lot of subsidies for all kinds of things. That didn't seem to stick. But unless they're not going to be able to get a lot of these. Even if they come up with good ideas, they're going to have trouble getting them past their existing demographic and their own legislative caucus.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, because we know that just from watching the last couple weeks and the opinions of everybody. And I remember on your last show you talked about anybody below the age of 30. What was it? 90% voted DPP.
Staggeringly high.
It was a very large percentage. So how do you change that mindset of the young people? And from my perspective is this generation, anybody that's below 40 years old, they understand democracy. Mm-hmm. And so what is the KMT? How are they going to address preserving and protecting the democracy? So that's the question that they're going to have to answer. The DPP's answered it. Yep, we're here to protect our sovereignty. We're here to protect democratic values. The KMT, have you ever heard about that in the last 10 years? Very little.
They always speak about protecting democracy. They talk a lot about it. Yes and no. I mean, they participate in the elections, and if they lose, they do step down. So on that front, the thing is they don't have much intraparty democracy. I think the problem that they have there is that the parties run hierarchically.
Yes.
And so if they want to bring in younger members who could then energize younger supporters, the whole party's structured very poorly for that. And Wu, through his legislative choices, makes it even harder.
Yeah, I mean, they're all old. It's the venerable second-generation KMTers that they're holding all the positions.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see it all.
But the giant elephant in the room, and the real big one, is national sovereignty.
Yes.
And cross-strait relations, which we'll get to right after the break. All right, welcome back. All right, so just before the break, we talked about how the big elephant in the room for the KMT is, of course, cross-strait relations. Now, this is interesting because even Ma Ying-jeou, he said that China was responsible for skewing the 92 consensus, and that which of course he was the one who really took the 1992 consensus and ran with it. The 92 consensus, of course, was made up by Suu Kyi in 2000, but it kind of took on a life of its own as a diplomatic fig leaf, I guess you could call it, where the KMT said that the 92 consensus was a one China, but different interpretations on each side, and China would say one China and leave off the different interpretations because the PRC never accepted that formulation. So Ma was complaining about that the other day, and pretty much every day there seems to be a new article coming out with some major figure questioning the 92 consensus or saying it needs to be reconsidered or a new formulation needs to come out. Now what that would be, who knows?
Well, I mean, from going back to pragmatics and getting away from ideology, is the KMT has to make a very clear cut decision because it was pretty evident in the election that the 1992 consensus means really nothing. And
One
for
country, two systems, as far as the PRC is concerned. Xi Jinping changed that last year. Yeah,
but from the Taiwan perspective, I mean, the youth here, they don't want it.
No.
And from any pragmatic perspective, it's a made up thing that Suu Kyi and whatever and however it started and took this life, as you explain it, took a life of its own. It doesn't work. So the KMT has to make a concerted effort to either just get rid. I mean, if they want to be successful, they're going to have to get rid of it. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. And I think that, and this is of course, that was the fourth part of the KMT Reform Committee, is to address this. So what they're going to do is going to be very interesting to see what they propose. The thing is, within the KMT, and looking at the KMT chair race and who the candidates are going to be, they're going to be in a rock and a hard place.
Oh yes, I mean when you look at some of these, the TV news shows that they have after 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, and you can see most of the spokes or the people that they have on their commentators, they're all the KMT youth or the KMT people that had very vocal opinions of these issues that we're talking about. That's going to be in the as part of the KMT's new face that they're going to have. They all got kicked out prior to the election. And so when you kick out all these young people, what's left? And so this is going to be an interesting dynamic that we're going to see shake out here in the next 2 months up to May.
Very, very much so. So they're going to have to face the rock and the hard place is that basically the public, especially the young, but also a larger percentage of the older generations, really never want Taiwan to be part of the People's Republic of China. And the DPP has moved very much into the mainstream. They're pro keeping the status quo, which is where the vast majority of the public is right now. The DPP's position on the 92 consensus, that it infringes on Taiwan's sovereignty, is widely agreed with.
Correct.
Now, within the KMT, though, the people who vote, the KMT members who vote on who the chair is going to be, a lot of those people are pretty hardcore on eventual unification with China, strong relations with China. And so the people who make up that voting electorate within the KMT are very much outside of the mainstream public viewpoint.
Correct.
So whoever these candidates are that are running for the KMT chair, if they want to build a KMT that's widely electable in national elections, not so much local ones, but national elections, they're going to have to come out with some kind of new formulation that appeases their base, the public at large, and the People's Republic. But the People's Republic just doubled down, saying that the 92 consensus is the unshakable foundation of any communications between Taiwan and China, which means that now the KMT, which is talking about reforming the 92 consensus, that's basically throwing the gauntlet down to the KMT. Yes.
And so remember we talked on the other show, or the new show that you have here, Taiwan Context, is we talked about the issues of what the PRC is doing, right? Mm-hmm. And so their coercive and diplomatic coercion that they have, or that they do against all these countries, and specifically Taiwan. And so what they've done here, and I know we alluded to this, and Michael Turton and I have talked about what China does, is this is something where they're painting themselves into the corner that has the theory that they're preparing for the use of force. And so that paints that picture it paints paints them into that corner that they have no other choice but to use force to unify Taiwan with the motherland. I have to be sarcastic with that, sorry. but this is something where Michael, he had a very good article about this. He's talked about this, is that China really they're shaping the environment, and they're shaping the narrative. I like to use the term narrative. They're shaping this environment so they can prepare the domestic audience of the PRC people that the only way that they're going to have this so-called unification or reunification or whatever their terminology is from their narrative is to bring Taiwan back into the fold, is that this is the way the narrative is being painted. And so that this article is, of course, out of the Global Times. It's very hostile. It's very aggressive. And so that this is part of their coercive nature. And so, how's the KMT going to deal with this?
Yeah, Mike has written a lot on that. I've written an article or two on that as well, but I frankly learned a lot of that thinking from Mike. So what they're doing is, and there was an article the other day in the Global Times that laid this out very specifically. It was called "Reunification by Force Sentiment Provoked by the DPP." So, and this was Ma Xiaoguang, who's the head of the Taiwan Affairs Office in China, which is tasked with building the eventual reunification, as they call it. And so that what the point of the article is they're saying that, public opinion is rising in China, to use force to reunify the motherland, and they used examples, and these are the kinds of examples that Mike was so sharp and astute in pointing out, is they use specific examples like they say, analysts are saying in this Global Times, which is of course a Communist Party mouthpiece, that all the economic incentives and benefits that we've been giving the Taiwanese are not working.
Isn't terms like ungrateful?
Yes, they use words like ungrateful, and so it's all the fault of these Taiwanese secessionists who are poisoning the minds of the people in Taiwan, and it's their fault. So, if we have to resort to force, well,
woe is me.
Woe is me. Yeah, I mean, we want everything to be peaceful, but
those darn renegades.
Yes, those DPP and Taiwan secessionists. So of course, this means that if the KMT drops the 92 consensus, they're going to have to twist themselves up like a pretzel to try and come up with a new formulation that appeals to all these different interest groups. They're going to have to get real creative.
Well, your term is rock in a hard place.
Yes.
Jingtui Liangnan is the Mandarin for it.
Yes.
I mean, they're definitely in this rock and a hard place. There's no way. I mean, how are you going to do that? I mean, it's going to be some very creative thinking. And if they do drop it, well, I think a lot of these economic interests that these KMT I call them the second generation KMTers. So they're the ones that are out of all the major KMT families. This is the second generation, really, is as we'd say the term "screw the pooch," and their parents have to be rolling in their graves with the way that they've approached the relationship with the CCP in China. How are they going to get out of this narrative? The only way they can do it is they all have to retire and just step down, and then let this 50 and below crowd of these KMT professionals, let them reinvent this third generation of KMTers into a new party. Or a new party, theory and a new party narrative of what does the KMT stand for in reference to Taiwan, the Republic of China. Of course, they have to use that. What is this narrative going to be? And so it's going to be up to this third generation, but they're not there yet.
Yep, they don't have the power, and the voting membership, of course, of the party is going to be opposed to a lot of these changes, but they need to make these changes to be broadly electable on the national level.
So,
as quite a while ago, even when Tsai's opinion polling was very low, I was telling people, no, Taiwan's going to win re-election. Mike's article, read it. He goes into a lot of the reasons why both he and I said, no, Taiwan's still going to win it, regardless of how high the poll ratings for Han were earlier last year. And it's because of this issue. This is the big issue. They're not going to get young voters back unless they can come up with something that appeals to them.
Yeah.
But I can almost guarantee that anything they come up with that will appeal to the younger generations in Taiwan will not fly with the PRC.
No, it will not. And so, where I think it's interesting is, and we talked about this on the break here, is looking at all the candidates for the KMT chair. I mean, it looks like it's still all these 60 years old and above crew. It looks like that's your major candidates again. And so do we see change in the future? So why don't you go over these candidates we were talking about here?
Yeah, well, of the four that are in the race right now for the KMT chair that are declared, there's the Blue Sky Alliance person who hopeless. There's Zhang Yazhong, who ran for president. He's an NTU professor. I think frankly, I think he's doing it just so he can get his voice out there. Then we've got Hao Longbin, the former mayor of Taipei.
Yep.
He's 69, I think. He did say that that the foreign affairs and relations with China need to be reconsidered. He was pretty vague, but he seems to be open to the idea of at least a discussion being held. Now, the latest one to enter the race is Johnny Chiang, Jiang Jitsan. He's from here in Taichung, up in Fengyuan. He's Red Faction, so he's Taiwanese. He's a factional Paul. He's 47, if I recall. I've met him a couple of times, and he's a very personable guy. He seems pretty smart. And so he is by the KMT party standards at 47. He's basically a swaddling babe. I mean, he's fairly young. He specifically came out on the sovereignty issue is that he said that the 92 consensus needs to be reviewed. He didn't completely come down on removing it, but he said that needs to be reviewed, reconsidered. And he made some comments that right now it's just not working. He also said that any new formulation has to emphasize the existence of the ROC. Now, that's interesting because that gets right to the core of the 92 consensus problem, where the KMT said it's two sides, each side with different interpretations, whereas the PRC never accepted that. So he's basically saying that any new formulation with regards to China has to have has to acknowledge the existence of the Republic of China at its core. Now, whether or not, if he were to win and stick with that, I don't know. He may have to buckle because there'd be from inside the party, there'd be a lot of pressure against that. And of course, from the PRC side, just simply wouldn't accept it. They will never acknowledge the Republic of China as existing country. Now, Johnny Chiang is, he won re-election in this last election by a huge margin. He won with a pretty handy majority. Now that actually contrasts quite significantly with over in the Taichung 2 in Salu, that area, where his counterpart from the Black Faction, their similar generation, Yan Quanhang, who's the son of Yan Qingbiao, lost in this last election to the Taiwan State Building Party candidate, Chen Bo-wei.
Chen Bo-wei.
Yeah. And so the Black Faction, that's a huge hit for them. But of the 38 legislators that the KMT still has, Johnny Chiang did one of the best. He's also been fairly high profile in the past on TV shows, in interviews. So he's a fairly high profile guy. So he's got a pretty good shot. Now, there's a lot of candidates who may jump in. Eric Chu Liluan, the former chair, says he'll announce something possibly at the end of Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year. He does not know for sure. He'll announce. Terry Goh has been bandied around. Wayne Chang has been bandied around. Ma Ying-jeou, Zhou Shiwei has expressed interest. Xie Longjie. So there's this long list of people. Han Guoyu could come into it. Hou Youyi seems to be ruling it out. We suspect that Wayne Chang is going to run for mayor.
That's a smart move for Hou Youyi. He definitely wants to wait a couple of years before he sticks his nose into any type of leadership position. He wants to stay quiet. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want the Han Guoyu stink on him. That's the thing. That's right. Yeah. And so, and again, so when you look at this list, who's 55 years old and below?
Johnny Chiang.
Johnny Chiang.
Now, here's the thing that's going to be a little bit tough for Johnny Chiang. because he's Taiwanese and he's in factional Paul, there's the Huang Fuxing, which is the military veterans organization. They're all heavy descendants of people who came over in 1949 with the KMT then. And those guys, they're very suspicious of native Taiwanese after Li Denghui.
Correct, yeah.
Started promoting essentially Taiwan's independence and democratization. So they may push back against him as an option. But we'll see. He's high profile, and the real question that I think is going to boil down to for the KMT membership is, are they going to stay loyal to what their traditional principles are? Or, and that would mean probably going with Hao Lombin or somebody like that, of the declared candidates, or do they feel desperate enough to win back power that they will be willing to gamble on someone else? And I think that's going to be what really boils down.
I mean, that's the fork in the road. They have to make a decision. There's no three-way. It's not a four-way intersection. This is a fork. It's a decision, yes or no. It's a binary. Mm-hmm. So, we'll see what happens here in the next 2 or 3 months. But if I were to, again, I'm going to put my wager that it's going to stay within the second generation KMTers, so it's going to be above 60. And they're going to toy around, play with the 92 consensus. They'll play with it, wicker it, but it's not going to change. And you're going to see the old guard's going to stay there. And it'll be an interesting dynamic for the next 2 years.
Yeah, maybe they'll come up with something like the Ma-Xi Summit consensus or something
Who
like
knows?
that. All right, just very quickly before we head out, I want to give a shout out to the Australians. Mark Harrison came up with a piece. It was co-written with somebody I didn't recognize. He's been strong on Taiwan for a long time. Really good, solid work. And the Natasha Kassam has been just awesome. Just awesome. Been coming out with stuff left, right, and center. And she was a diplomat in China previously, and in a very short amount of time has come up to speed on Taiwan and is now one of the best writers out there. I'm very impressed.
I tell you, Australia needs to really, really focus hard on their future, because their relationship with China is just it's a mess.
Yeah,
and their leadership really needs to come to terms with what their government and their future is going to be.
Yeah.
And so these writers, I know they're pointing it out, but again, back to the narrative. I mean, hopefully these writers can get the Australian government back onto the correct narrative.
Yes. And so with that, we're going to end the show. Look forward to next week. Mike will be back then. And check us out on Taiwan Context.
That's report.tw. Find us there.
This has been brought to you by the Taiwan Report. For more content like this, become our patron at report.tw.
哎呦，就是那个台湾狗啦，最喜欢我的台湾狗了。